Well, hi, my name is Bronte Price, and I'm a cis gay guy, and I'm the founder and manager of the Equality Network. Welcome to this safe space discussion where we have regular chats with individuals from right across the LGBTIQ plus spectrum. And the main aim, of course, of all of these chats is to just get a greater and deeper understanding of that whole community. So today we're joined by Jimmy Rizk, who's going to introduce himself. So welcome, Jimmy, and thanks for coming on board today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So let's get the language right. Tell us
Sure.
about your gender identity and your sexuality, if you will, please, and your pronouns.
No worries. Okay, so I go by he, him, his. I identify, I guess, as male, but I'm a transgender man. And my sexuality, I would say, is pretty fluid.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go back to the start, I guess, and tell us a little bit about what your life was like as a child.
Um, okay, well, growing up, I mean, I think I always knew how I felt, um, in terms of being trans. Um, I was a really happy kid. I don't think I felt particularly bothered by the way that I felt inside, apart from just being frustrated at my body. Um, yeah, I was surrounded by like a loving family, lots and lots of cousins, being a big wog family. Yeah, like things were really great. Yeah.
So
Um,
it was a happy childhood, right?
Yeah, for sure. Very colorful, full of love, like adventure, excitement. We're very passionate people, my family, so that always featured heavily. Still to this day, I'm a very passionate, excitable person.
Yeah.
Yeah, my life was very colorful, you know. So yeah.
Thanks. So you got to a point in your life where you decided to transition and to announce that you were trans. Tell us how that occurred, please. What was the thinking in your head and what were the emotions
Mm.
going through you?
Well, I mean, like I was saying before, I always knew that I was trans. I didn't have the language to describe it.
Yep.
But I kind of grew up, went through puberty, was feeling more and more a little bit uncomfortable with my body. And, recognizing that quietly in my own mind, because I really didn't dare verbalize that to my peers or my family at the time.
Yep.
And yeah, I guess kind of like moving into my first year of uni, that was when I really started feeling it. Um, I think as well because I, up to that point, had existed as a very androgynous person. No gender roles specifically had been placed on me. I was like pretty carefree. I
Yep.
just felt like I was who I was. But like, you know, getting into my late teens, early 20s, I felt that there was certain social expectations on me. Obviously my physicality and noticing, a greater and greater divide between like cis men and cis women.
Yep.
So it really started to take a toll on me. And, I guess I kind of like was coping at the time with a lot of alcohol,
Yep.
to kind of deal with the chaos in my own mind. But I had stumbled across a lot of Tumblr pages. I don't know if you remember from back then. And that's when I started to actually discover like what it was to be transgender. Like, actually learning the word and having a definition for it, and then going, oh my God, that is how I feel.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that that was something that was shared by more people than just me.
Yep.
So I started to be like, oh, this is something that happens. And then on top of that, I was seeing people mainly in the States documenting this start of their transition journey. And I was like, you can do something about it? Like, that was like, blew my mind, you know? Because I always felt stuck, I guess. And so I'm a silver lining kind of guy, pretty happy go lucky. I was like, oh, well, look, just like make the best of the situation. This is your lot in life. Just have fun, to the best of your ability, be a good person. But then seeing that I could actually do something about it, it just like opened up this whole new world to me and a whole new future, like a vision for myself, you know? Um, and I just, I became really fixated on it, and I would just spend hours and hours to like early morning, just like trawling the internet, reading things, watching things, like essentially like doing this giant research project on what it was to be trans and what I could do and how the system here in Australia worked, and in terms of transitioning. And yeah, I spent a couple of years kind of playing around with that in private until I eventually was like, you know what? I think I want to experiment with a social transition. So I told my partner at the time, and I told a couple of my close friends. And I just tried on like a new name, just tried on for size, tried on some new pronouns,
Wow.
because I didn't want to commit to something so publicly unless I knew that that was actually what I needed and what I wanted. So I guess being that young age as well, it kind of gave me the freedom to be a bit experimental. People expected of someone that age. I'm sure my family noticed, you know, that I was a little bit more androgynous than I was before. But people just kind of let it go. Like, I mean, they used she back then. She's just doing something, you know, like. So I just played around with it because I needed to know before I presented it to my family, especially. And my friends and partner at the time just really allowed me to do that in a safe way. So I was like super lucky.
Wow.
But you know, I I did come up against some people that would question me or hassle me or just not understand.
Yeah.
So it was tricky to navigate, but
So that,
yeah, that started it for me.
thank you. So the social transitioning at that age, you're right, I think you're at that age where society kind of gave you this license, even this expectation to experiment with sexuality, even gender, perhaps less than now. Were there differences in your research project that you did? Did you find some differences between the United States experience and what you found about transitioning in Australia? Were there any differences?
Um, so, well, the first difference was it was very hard to find anything about transitioning in Australia.
Yeah.
So the US was way ahead of us. It seemed more common. Not that it was common, but you know, they had surgeons and endocrinologists who were involved in the, you know, helping people transition. Whereas here, like I desperately look for things, and I'd have like random little blog entries on some big forum of like someone talking about something, and I'd try to look it up, and maybe I'd find something else, or like that wasn't, I don't know, relevant anymore, or it was really hard. So I found that when I first started transitioning, I didn't really know what to do, who to go see, and then people that I did see also didn't really seem like they knew what the process was,
Yeah.
because this is back in, when would it have been? Maybe 2012,
Yeah.
around then.
Yeah.
And that was definitely before it had become a mainstream thing that was understood. You know, I can only imagine what it would have been like before that for trans people. It's just,
Yeah, that's right. And so you had a kind of a support network, a tight group of your tribe, I guess, who you could be safe with, or you could talk about transitioning, at least socially, safely. And they were really critically important to your decision to keep transitioning. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it showed me straight away that if I was choosing my truth, that people are going to be there. People that genuinely loved me and cared about me. And, they can, you can tell when you're looking at somebody and they're being honest with themselves and with the world around them.
Yeah.
So I actually think majority of people will support that,
Yeah.
unless they are so deeply afraid of something that's not status quo or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think we have to give maybe more people credit. I don't know. This is just my experience, and I don't think it really reflects the majority because I guess it was hard, and maybe it's my perspective that I choose to adopt. But on the whole, I felt very supported. So, and I didn't think that I was going to be,
Yeah. Okay.
and I would have done things sooner had I known that people would be there. But I also didn't have the expectation of people to get it right away.
No.
I think I managed my expectations, and so I never felt disappointed. And I mean, any human that's confronted with new, challenging information, it takes us a while to integrate it before we can understand it and then apply it. So I think I try to be tolerant of people because, yes, I deserve respect, but also, like, we don't all just get everything straight away.
No.
And I think that when you show people a little bit of patience and compassion, you receive that too.
Yeah, you get it back, don't you? So the
Yeah.
thoughts that were going through your head in that time, and you I think took a little time to transition or to just work out what you wanted to do in your own head and in your own space. The
Mm.
thoughts that were going through your head were they confusion? Were they thoughts around where do I get information and support? Where do I find my biggest supporters? That sort of
Mm.
thing.
Gotta put my self back into that headspace. It's been such a long time. I think sometimes I've just rewritten things almost, and yeah,
And it's okay to say that is the answer. All right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll I think probably I think actually the thing that was the main thing going on in my head was I just have to survive.
Uh,
Um, and I knew that if I stopped and let myself feel the weight of what I was choosing to do,
yeah.
because to feel it, to me, it's not a choice,
Yeah.
but I chose to pursue medical transition,
Yeah.
So if I let the weight of my choice
Yeah.
get to me, I feel like I would have lost my momentum and I would have really crumbled and I could have fallen into maybe a worse depression or
Yeah.
it would have prolonged um, the stagnation of my life because that's what happened. For a few years, my life didn't progress because I couldn't.
Yeah.
So my mentality was just take a step, just keep going because whatever people are going to have issues with it or you're going to come up against roadblocks, but I just need to keep going because if I don't, I'm not going to get through it.
And so the first step was social transition, just safely and gently. Was the
Mm-hmm.
next step the medical transition? Was that?
Yeah, so I kind of did things a little bit back to front in terms of I had surgery before I started hormones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that was because I was already passing maybe half of the time before hormones. Um, so yeah, I just needed to have surgery in my chest done because I was like, I can't, like that for me was a major thing. I was like, I just can't deal with it anymore. I don't want to bind. I'm big on comfort.
Yeah.
And to have to bind every day, it didn't sit well with me. I didn't like what it was making my body feel. And it was too much of a constant reminder. So yeah, basically first step in terms of my
Yeah.
medical transition. And then I think it was maybe close to a year after that I started hormones.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and pretty much as soon as I got on hormones, like my life changed like drastically for the better.
Yeah.
Like I just can't even begin now that I'm thinking about it, which I don't reflect on it a lot.
Yeah.
But when people ask me, I do, and I'm like, oh wow, like it's right now I'm just going for the first time. Actually, it was the hormones that really enabled me to feel like I could operate in society as just your everyday person.
Surely it's a confidence thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Confidence
I
thing
mean,
about this new persona. Yeah.
yeah, and because I always knew who I was and how I felt, but you know, we're very visual people. So the world, they see you and then they go, okay, that's who you are. So I was just tired of having to reassert, no, this is who I am all the time. And now I don't deal with that at all. I pass 100% of the time. Most people that meet me don't know that I'm trans. So if I want to tell them, I have to like out myself purposefully. Um, I feel super lucky because I guess this is what I wanted. I know some people don't necessarily want to fly under the radar. They want to maintain some of their trans visibility or they want to inhabit in between. But for me, like it's a very clear, like I am on the far end of like the spectrum of like, male, female, I'm bang, right on the end.
Yeah.
So this is like everything I could have ever dreamed of. Like so I'm so happy. Like in my life, in my body, I feel so good. It's just, yeah. I never could have imagined it would work this well,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Tell me, if you will, about your cultural background and the response, not only of your friends, but particularly of your family, your parents, please.
So my dad's family are Lebanese. My dad was born there and migrated with his siblings, and my mom is Spanish and Italian.
Yeah.
My dad's side are Shiite Muslims,
Yeah.
and my mom's side are Roman Catholics. Um, and they all come from the villages, and it's actually quite traditional. A lot of ways, the way they think. There's a lot of gender roles. If you kind of think of the stereotypes, I think that my family could fit it. I mean, that's a very one-dimensional view of them, but yeah. So I was terrified
Yeah.
to tell my family that, because family to me is everything, and that's part of our culture too. It's like family is everything.
Yeah.
So feeling that and knowing their attitudes, being quite conservative at times and traditional, religious, it was probably the hardest thing in my entire transition was to tell my family.
Yeah.
And I put it off for a few years. I had surgery and I didn't even tell my extended family.
Wow.
The only reason I told my extended family was because I was on testosterone. I was like, these guys are gonna find out. They're gonna notice when you start growing facial hair and your voice breaks and you lose your hair.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to tell them. I there's no way I can get around this. And I was at a point where I was like, do you know what? If I lose them, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, I'm the only one responsible for my happiness. And I was sick of living for other people's comfort and peace of mind. I didn't want to rock the boat, but I had to, because this is my life. I'm living it. Nobody else is. So, but that's why I had to be sure. And that's why I had to experiment. Because if I was at risk of losing too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I told them, and to be honest, they surprised me with their ability to accept me, even though they didn't understand.
Yep.
Um, and I don't know if that's part of like the religious thinking coming into it, in that, we are compassionate towards all people. I
Yeah.
don't know if they just love me so overwhelmingly and unconditionally that it didn't matter, or it's probably a combination of all the things. But um, the person I was most afraid to tell was my nonna, my
Oh,
mom's mum,
yeah.
and she's my only living grandparent. And she was 44 when I was born, so I've known her for almost half her life. I've been very lucky,
Yeah.
and we're close. We're really close. And she's very outspoken, very traditional, very, very religious, matriarch of my family. Like, I revere and respect her so much. And I wrote to her, and I was just at a point where I was like, I'm not asking them for their support. I'm just telling them, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. And if you want to come along for the ride, you're obviously more than welcome to.
Wow.
But I had to put it that way for myself, because I was like, if I'm looking to them for approval, that's wrong. I have to just know and just tell them, hey, this is what I'm doing. And she wrote back to me and she said,
Oh,
that was such a well written email. That was her first thing. She was just so proud of the way I could
oh,
express myself through words. And she's like, like, I'll always love you. And then, so that was very short and sweet. And then I went to her house because I needed her to have time to let it digest. I didn't want to spring it on her and then just wait for the first reaction. So I went to her house, we sat down, we had coffee, had some things to eat, and then we got down to it. And, I told her, like, I was really scared to tell you. She's like, I don't know why everybody's so scared to tell me things, like, she just made it seem like it was okay to talk about that stuff. But I'd never had a conversation with her like that ever in my life. And she said to me, like, I didn't know what it meant, so I had to Google the word transgender. But even that,
man.
she didn't understand. And she's like, I need to understand. This is important.
Yeah.
She took it on herself to educate herself,
Wow.
and I was just really blown away.
How,
Yeah. And I mean, like, yeah,
how old would she have been at that time when you did that? You had that conversation with her?
I reckon she would have been in her mid
Yeah.
60s.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Um,
Sometimes they
yeah,
surprise you, don't they? Older people, we think the old non
honestly,
is just going to lose it and disown me or never talk to me again. And here she is
yeah,
googling the term transgender to find out, because she wants to find out. She wants to learn.
yeah. I just, it was,
Wow.
it was wild. Honestly, I just was like shocked. Yeah, and we sat down for like 2, 3 hours just talking about the issue of, well, issue, what happens with, if I want to have a family, because that's super important to us. Then my choice of partners, like what I'm attracted to. But I think because I am generally romantically attracted to women, my nonna found it much easier to understand
Yes.
me.
Yes.
Whereas my younger sister is lesbian,
Yeah.
and I've got a few gay cousins,
Yeah.
and she struggles
Yeah.
understanding their relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, she's welcoming and warm to their partners. Like, it's out in the open. It's not,
Yeah.
hidden under the rug kind of thing. But I just feel that she doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
She very much is, in her mind, needs to be a man and a woman. But
Okay.
so it's bizarre that being trans, I feel more accepted than if I were to just come out as like a lesbian.
Wow.
Mm,
You alluded to the fact earlier that there were some people who weren't quite as embracing as your family. Do you want
mm.
to, obviously in an anonymous way, but just give us an example of the sort of hurdles socially that you had to go through
Sure.
in that period, please?
Yeah, I mean, I've had men on the street asking me at night to basically pull down my pants to prove um, my gender through my genitals. Um, and, I've just had, well, even just people that um, fetishize it a little bit,
Yeah.
which I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. But sometimes I think it can make you feel like you're not seen as a human.
Yeah.
You're seen more as a novelty.
Some sort of,
Um,
yes.
yeah, and that does get to me a little bit because I'm very big on like preserving our sense of humanity. We're all connected, we're all equal kind of thing. So that can get to me. Um, Oh, I've had people on the train, like, just what are you, a boy or a girl? Like a group of like young guys, and then I'm like, I'm scared that I'm gonna get bashed,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically.
Just,
Um,
yeah.
Just like every now and then. And it was only for a couple of years before I was on hormones that I encountered people that made me feel unsafe.
Yeah.
But you still carry the fear with you. I mean, I'm afraid that if police know, like when I get stopped roadside for a breath test or whatever it is, or I've been pulled over for speeding or whatever, I'm like, what's going to happen here? Like
Yeah.
it's just a fear that I carry, or like in the change rooms at the gym.
Yep.
I don't know who knows that I'm trans there,
Yep.
but like I'm out publicly and
Yep.
I know there are some guys from Grindr at my gym. So then I'm like, well, am I actually like maybe in danger here? I don't know. I don't think about it too often, but it lingers there.
Every now and then that thought is there, and you look
Yeah.
for some of the signals that this might be a bit of an unsafe area, or I just better watch my speed because, I don't want to get pulled over. There are still surely unsafe places, particularly for not
Mm,
only, but especially for trans and gender diverse and gender
mm.
fluid people, I think, more so perhaps than the rest of the LGBTIQ plus community, I reckon. And like you said, it can
Yeah.
be just in simple places. It can be at a supermarket. It can be on a train. It can be. Do you want to talk about? And this is a whole subject for another interview. But do you want
Mm.
to tell us what you do for a job?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a carpenter. I run my own carpentry business. So yeah, lots of construction workers around.
Here we are. We'll leave that for another time. But that's fascinating, I think. So tell us. You talked earlier about the really beautiful difference it made to your not only your self identity and your self confidence, but also your mental health. I think, and that continues, right?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
But I found that the medical transition at the start alleviated um, a lot of like I don't know what is it called? Oh, I use the word for it sometimes. Like critical stuff,
Yeah.
It like it got rid of the sense of urgency for like a lot of my
Yeah.
mental health stuff and all that. But I kind of just started my medical transition and filed the rest of the stuff away, right? And now that I'm, I don't know, 7, 8 years into my transition,
Yeah.
and I'm older now, like I'm turning 30 in 2 days.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
wow.
like, I am now at a point where, I'm reflecting a little bit more on the enormity of it.
Yeah.
And I still carry like a lot of insecurities. I'm like recently single as well. So I was meant to be married at the end of last year and that fell through. And then re-entering the world, a bit damaged and heartbroken, but also as a trans person who hasn't been in the dating world for a long time,
Yeah.
I find that I'm always really nervous. You know, I have this dialogue sometimes like, oh, nobody's going to want to be with me. I'm a freak, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's not the case. I mean,
No.
I've been having a very good time,
Yeah. Thank you.
but yeah, it's something
Yeah.
that I think about every now and then. I'm like, who's going to want to spend their life with somebody who's trans? Like, it's going to make children, more complicated for them, or it might make things with their family complicated, or there are so many things that I've already had to address when
Yeah.
I've decided to go on this journey. But for them, it's a choice. Do they want to accept that for their life? So, I worry about that.
I understand that. I wonder what kind of things as a trans man give you hope for the future,
Mm,
particularly around future people who are where you were 10 or 12 years ago.
mm.
What sort of things now give you hope for trans people?
Um, I think just the fact that I see it almost everywhere now. It's not something that's hidden in the dark anymore. Um, we talk about it. People talk about it over family dinners sometimes. Like there's a conversation, and that's the start. And I think slowly over time, people's attitudes are changing because they're exposed to. It's like I feel like before people had this really niche idea of what it was to be a trans person. And they thought that we suffered and we had a chip on our shoulder and all this kind of stuff. And that was the reason why I started talking about me being trans, because I was like, hey, I'm trans. I'm like super happy. Like, I just want that to be part of our narrative. I want people to know that there are trans people out there who run their own businesses and who have heaps of friends, and they still have their family around them, and they have successful, intimate relationships, and they can have a family. And I want people to know that trans people have fulfilling lives. I just used to get so frustrated by like anytime I had seen something about a trans person or heard somebody talking, it was always like, someone being like, it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so hard. And like, yeah, it is hard, but so is a lot of things. And I don't know, maybe other trans people would be upset at me saying that. I don't know. But I just think like, let's just change the narrative a bit, like, so that people need to know like who we are, you know, not just a caricature of us.
Yeah, that's right. Not just
Um,
that stereotype.
yeah.
And there are lots of positive stories coming through that we're hearing often now. We're seeing many, many more people who are transitioning, but also telling their stories, um, ranging from kids at quite a primary school coming out
Yeah.
as trans people and beginning to transition through to older people in their 50s and 60s who have decided that
Yeah.
there's been a certain event in their life that's now led to them deciding that, okay, I need to be my authentic self for the rest of
Mm,
my time on earth. I think, one of the big things also that's happened over the last 15, 20 years, I think, Jimmy, is the amount of support, the number of support structures, organisations, and leaders, activists, and culture changers who have told their stories, but also not taken the crap anymore. We're not going to put up with it anymore, and have got
yeah.
on that front foot. And there've been individuals like you who have been willing to tell their story just one by one, and educate people in the general population a bit more, I think.
That's it. It's
Yeah,
just making the population familiar with
yeah,
it, because we're all just scared of the unknown,
thank you.
and none of us want to be ostracized,
No,
you know? And so people think, I think a lot of cis people think that they'll be ostracized for accepting or celebrating trans or queer people, And it's like, no, like, come on, jump on the bandwagon. Like, the more the better,
it's kind of
spread
where
love.
it's kind of where that being gay by association with a gay person was back in the 1970s. And,
Yeah.
you know, made some gay people close that closet door even more firmly than it was before. If you were to give some advice to a young person who's perhaps watching this video, this interview, and they're thinking about the sort of thing that you were thinking pre-transition, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
I think I would say, like, trust your gut. If you're feeling something and you're questioning something, run with it. Um, you know, it's you're not going to lose out by exploring and experimenting and finding yourself. Um, and I think it's important to also, like, give a few close people around you your trust, because you are going to need people to love you and to bounce ideas off and give you a space where you can talk about things that you might be concerned that other people would question you too much for. Like, you need a sounding board, because when you've got all of this stuff going around in your head, it's too much. So I think definitely, like, having, trusted support network around you is, like, super, super important.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Tell us why it's important to celebrate and tell our stories about, coming out, and also about transitioning. Why is that important?
I think celebrating anything is important because it's joyful, and it makes you feel connected, and we need that. Trans people need that. We need to also be proud of ourselves. When you're celebrating something, you're proud of it. When you're telling your story, you're proud of it. If you're feeling ashamed, you're probably not going to share.
Yeah.
So, like, we need to. Yeah, I think we need to celebrate to, like, reinforce this idea that it's worth celebrating.
Thanks.
We're worth celebrating.
Thank you. And thereby helping normalize, and
Absolutely.
have those conversations rather than just assume based on some old dead stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Jimmy, thank you for being so open and so generous with not only your time, but also some very intimate details of your
Yeah,
transition
of
and of
course.
your coming out. And we'll be certainly in touch with you for some further safe space conversations and chats, and all the very best. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.